We got a great one for all you prospect sickos. It's a Rule 5 recap here on the call-up. Aram Layton, Elijah Evans, and we got plenty of prospects to talk about. Of course, mostly pitchers. I think we only had one bat taken, but a lot of arms to talk about. A couple White Sox arms that I know Elijah is excited to talk about, and one former White Sox arm that I'm excited to talk about. It's funny because I had the Rule 5 circled the whole time we were in Orlando. Like, I know you did too. And there's so many other probably more headline grabbing things going on, but it's really cool. Like the concept of these guys who have been in the minor leagues for a while now are going to get an opportunity, assuming nothing goes disaster, like there's no disaster in spring training, are going to get the opportunity to play at the big league level, whether they were at the complex, AA, AAA. And we've got a little bit of everything, by the way, in this crop. Is so exciting. So I'm excited to break it down with you.
Yeah, it's fun, man. I mean, I think we had fun. I had fun being there as my first Rule 5 and first winter meetings as a whole. So we had a great time in Orlando. And then just, being in the draft room, it's just cool. You get a little energy from some of these teams where it's like, let's take a shot on this guy. And that's the whole point of the Rule 5, right? Is let's see what we can find. And it's every team has a different angle, right? I think you see some of these picks are a little bit more of like the safer upper level guys where they're like, oh, this guy is ready for the big leagues. Then you've got the guys where it's like, this guy might not be ready at all, frankly, but we like his talent enough where we're going to just see what happens and try to kind of shield a player, but put him into a big league role where then if it sticks and we can kind of make it work for a year, now we have that player for 6 years and we're super excited about it, right?
And that's the fun kind of two different, I would say, archetypes that are often taken in this Rule 5 is going to be those higher floor, just depth arms that you feel pretty good about just being able to grab innings for you, or that high octane stuff, leverage arm that if he doesn't throw enough strikes, you're probably returning him, but if he does, he may end up becoming a really nice found value there. And then every once in a while, you get a little bit more than that, and all of a sudden you have a starter like Shane Smith or whatever that may be. It doesn't seem like there's a clear candidate like that. And also, I'm a little disappointed. No Yohendrick Pinango. I know a lot of teams were considering it, but he survives. I know that for Blue Jays fans, they're excited there, and he'll stay in the Blue Jays system despite some of the best underlying batted ball data you're going to find. Might as well start with the guy that probably has the best chance of sticking. And that's the combination of team situation and I think just his stuff in command. And it's RJ Pettit going to the Rockies from the Tigers. He became really popular. I think he went like semi-viral. As viral as like a Rule 5 draft candidate could go in like baseball Twitter in that sphere, because he's 6'8", 300 pounds. But he also moves really well for a guy that's 6'8", 300 pounds. Threw a lot of strikes this past year, had a great year, and pitched his way into an opportunity with a big league club.
Yeah, I mean, starting with the Rockies for a guy like Pettit, right? Like you've got a guy who the numbers are good, just the outlook on him is good. You saw it tick up even a little more in AAA, which I think is where it gets exciting. Obviously, there's different leagues. AA can be a little bit harder to hit in sometimes, but like the strikeout rate went up to almost 13 Ks per nine when he got to AAA in the second half of the season this past year. Still maintained a good basis of the actual numbers. The ERA is strong. The FIP is good. All of the above, just really good, honestly. So I think it just is a guy who, especially for Colorado, right? Like they're looking for guys that can stick it all on the pitching side of things. And this is someone who honestly could end up getting pretty leverage innings for them fairly quickly if it goes well, right?
Yeah, 100%. And I think he will. And it's this new front office. There's a lot of new things going on there, and good things relative to what it's been in the past, where I think you have a little bit more forward thinking. And it feels like with Pettit, this arsenal is one that's a little bit more conducive to translating to altitude. Everyone's going to see their stuff knocked down a little bit at altitude, of course. But with Pettit, you've got two different fastball shapes. You've got the four-seamer that averages 96, and then you've got the sinker as well that averages about 94 and change. So you have these two slightly different speeds, two different shapes that he can ride. And some days it might feel like the sinker is getting knocked down a little bit more. You go to the four-seamer more. Some days the four-seamer just may not feel like it has the same amount of life. You go to the sinker more, or you can utilize both. And then even the slider, it's more of a shorter, harder, swervy slider in the mid-80s. Those pitches are going to be a little bit less affected than the bigger curveballs or the bigger sliders or the sweepers. So it's an arsenal that I think is going to play better or be less affected at altitude. And I think that's why the Rockies who now are actually paying attention to that kind of stuff, we're excited to add him. And, we're going to talk about like probability of sticking. And as I'm working on the Rule 5 article, I might just throw out some like arbitrary percentages and emphasis on arbitrary. But Pettit, I feel like, is one of the most likely to stick of all the names we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, we were looking at the list together here because we're in the same location right now, and it seemed like we were both immediately go to like 80+% for a guy like this because A, it's the Rockies, and B, he was already one of the most popular names that was getting circled by a lot of people going into the Rule 5 draft. Like it was pretty. I think there was only a couple names on this list who like were widely expected to be taken, honestly, and he was one of those. And given the situation, like seems like a guy that it would really have to go off the rails for the Rockies to say never mind, right?
Yeah, 100%. And everyone gets shelled for the most part out there. So I think he'd be even more patient. Last thing on him, slider's a plus pitch. Like he threw it more than 30% of the time. Chase rate north of 40%. Opponents had a 530 OPS against that pitch. I think he's going to be another good piece for that bullpen. And they actually have had some pretty good bullpen arms. So there's going to be a lot of high octane stuff, at least in that bullpen. And Pettit joins it.
Yeah, 100%. Next guy up, Chicago White Sox. This was an interesting one because I had heard at winter meetings like 6 different names that were possibilities. Had never heard Jedixson, Paez. And that's what's fun about the Rule 5 draft is you hear all these names, you have these ideas. There's some of the guys we're going to talk about later that were a possibility supposedly for the White Sox. They end up going with a 21-year-old pitcher who has never pitched above high A. Both their picks actually have never pitched above high A. But Jedixson, Paez, we looked into immediately. 19 innings last year in the Boston organization, but 2024 is a guy that threw almost 100 innings of 3 ERA ball, 113 strikeouts, 12 walks in his last full professional season. But then this past year, barely throws, deals with the injuries, was good in a very small sample, but obviously is going to need to be built up here after throwing 19 innings last year.
Yeah, and I think they're going to take their time as you figure like you can ease him into action, have him in mop-up duty, whatever it may be. But the clear thing here is he's kind of the perfect guy to ease in and mop-up duty. There's nothing worse than when you're down 10 runs and then you bring in a guy and he doesn't throw strikes, right? Paez is going to throw strikes, and I think that's very clear here. And you look at the 2024 results. I mean, he pounds, and even before he got hurt in 2025 in the limited action, more of the same. Was a 71% strike rate across his arsenal. The changeup, 72% strike rate. Curveball, 72% strike rate. The sinker, 76% strike rate. Like he's going to fill up the zone. And the question just becomes, how does the stuff play against higher quality competition? Because the underlying like results in terms of chase rate, whiff rate, all of those things are really high. But arms with good command like Paez at lower levels are going to exploit those hitters and I think that's what he did. So it becomes a question of like, okay, well, how is this stuff going to play, at the highest level? Because fastball, it averages about 90 to 92 miles per hour. We'll see, what it looks like. It was a little bit harder before the injury. He was averaging, maybe more to 92, 93. So we'll see. Again, the velocity side of things will be very interesting to see how he comes back. But that sinker, has been more 91, 92. And the pitches that I think really are exciting is the changeup has been really effective for him. The curveball he's thrown in stretches where it has some teeth to it and it's nasty. And both of those are higher velocity pitches. There's not a ton of velocity separation, but I think that's part of why he's actually able to get, a lot of chase, some ground balls, get hitters to expand a little bit. And he seemed to dodge barrels a decent amount in 24. The question is, is this stuff good enough essentially to be able to dodge barrels at the highest level? And there's only one way to find out.
Yeah, with him, it's going to be fascinating. The first thing that Chris Getz noted after the pick was that they view him long-term as a potential impact starter. So that signals to me, obviously, the command, right? You see the variety of pitches. That makes sense, right? But it's a guy who the innings basis, like you can't just throw him in the big leagues and say, hey, we're going to start you now, right? So the interesting layer there is it does sound like they like the idea of using him in kind of a potential opener role at some point, whether that be at the beginning of the season or later in the year as he gets more comfortable. Maybe it's more of just kind of eating some innings as the last guy in the bullpen early on, and then they kind of see if as the season progresses, if he could kind of be that potential opener. The White Sox seem very keen on using more openers for a couple of their young starting pitchers. Paez does seem like a guy that would make some sense with because you want to build up multi-inning spurts for him if you see him as a starter. Obviously, you can't throw him too much, though. Do you think, like, 80 to 90 innings is a reasonable target. That I feel like you can't go above 100 or so for a guy with the basis he has right now. I'm very curious. Getz also mentioned Mike Vassell, and they were like, yeah, it's a different type of pitcher, totally different profile that they brought in last year in the Rule 5, right? But that was a guy who was used in sort of a Swiss Army knife role where, he pitched out of the bullpen sometimes, he spot started sometimes, did a little bit of everything. Paez, maybe it's a little bit less leverage than Vassell faced, but I do think it could be a similar type of role for him in trying to just get his innings built up slowly.
Yeah, I think 100 is kind of that marker, right? Where you hope you can push to that. As you mentioned, like 96 and 2/3 and 24. And yeah, everyone has their own philosophy on coming off of injury, how they want to go about that. But I do think that's a decent number for him, especially the fact that he came back and threw a little bit later in the season as well. I'm very fascinated. I think that's going to be one of those things where you just check in, and if he's not fading, like just stretch him out a little bit more and play it by ear. But I think you can push to that 90, 100 inning threshold if they want to. But that would mean he's throwing the ball well too, because if you're only in mop-up duty, it's going to be hard to get to 100 innings. But I think this is obviously this long-term vision for them that they see, like maybe this guy can eventually be a back-end arm for them. And hey, he does look like the part of a guy that could be that innings-eating number 5 starter. And if you pick that up and, the Rule 5, given where the White Sox are at, build him up this year a little bit. And then maybe in 2026, or 2027, excuse me, he's a guy that can, grab onto a rotation spot for you.
Yeah, 100%. So I'm really curious to see this one. I think that the organization seems excited. You're taking an upside swing, right? You're taking a swing and hoping he can survive for 26. And if he survives for 26, then maybe you see him as a starter. But it is going to be tough for him to stick still with the experience he has.
So the average Rule 5 draft pick is it's a coin flip, right? It's 50% stick. I try to think about it like
50% stick, because it's interesting because last year only 3 are still with their team of the, I think 13, 14 that were drafted. So it's not many have stuck recently, right? Which is interesting.
No, but historically it's about 50%. I would probably, like, just using that as the marker, I'd put him slightly below. But it's also a matter of patience, because if they believe in, what he can do, then, maybe they'll be a little bit more patient. But I think Paez, I'd probably go right below, like 96 hits in 96 innings. And that was a low A, high A. I think there's a world where he just doesn't miss as many bats as they had hoped. And that'll be the question. So I like the get, though. Definitely a shot worth taking. And strike throwers are with that assortment of pitches are, not always easy to find, and, can often become undervalued at the major league level. So I like the shot to take, but I don't know if he's as likely to stick as maybe some of the other guys that we're going to talk about.
Yeah, would agree for sure. The third guy up, third pick in the draft by the Nationals organization, Griff McGarry from the Phillies system. This is a guy who was a pretty high pedigree prospect compared to a lot of guys on this list. This was a 5th round pick, but someone who had kind of risen up some draft or some boards in terms of just getting some steam at one point in his career. Obviously 26 years old now, and spent this past season primarily in AA, but got to AAA at the very end of the year. Had a really solid season in AA though while he was there.
It was his best year from a command standpoint. And that's, the stuff is so good. It was probably the best stuff of any arm available in the Rule 5 draft. And the thing though is that's been the story for multiple years now. And he's just had so many challenges to throw enough strikes that it hasn't really mattered. But this year it was a little bit better. The thing is that the best in like a big leap command wise is still a 14% walk rate. The other thing that was funny to me is it was a very clear sign of new times in Washington as well, right? Where I think the Nationals do care how hard you throw a ball for now, clearly. And that's a good thing, right? Like, pursue the high upside guy. Hey, there's a chance McGarry could be a closer for you, or I mean, they may try to start him. I'm excited to see like what their plan is there. I think that's a little crazy, but there's a chance he could be a leverage arm for you, or there's a chance he's just going to walk so many guys that you return him. But I think if you're the Nationals, you can afford to swing for the fences a little bit here with your pick. McGarry's stuff is like the curveball is ridiculous. Like, that's a plus or better pitch. The fastball is a plus heater, and then he mixes in a slider as well. It was amazing that he was actually able to turn lineups over a couple times, especially down the stretch of the season. He finished out the year with 5 innings of 1 hit, 1 run ball with 2 walks and 8 Ks in his 1 AAA appearance. Like, that's pretty darn good. So maybe he can build on that. I still see him more as a single inning relief guy. I just don't know if the command's going to be good enough. But the fact that he finished out the season where he could turn lineups over a couple of times is a far cry from where he was in 2024, where partly battled injuries, but then even in his 1 inning to 2 inning spurts, he was walking a ton of guys and was barely able to get through 1 to 2 innings.
Yeah, no, it is interesting. I mean, what's funny with him is he was a starter coming up through the system, went to relieving in 2024 to try and kind of find a better role for him with the command issues. But then they brought him back to starting this year, and it was better. It was still, the command was still iffy for sure. Still over 5 walks per 9 this season. But it was better. It was definitely better than even when he was, starting earlier in his career, and even when he was out of the bullpen, right? Out of the bullpen, it was even worse actually in 2024 when he was coming off some injuries and then pitching out of the pen. So I'm interested to see what they do. I probably would just let it loose in the bullpen, but with the Nationals being where they are as an organization, I wouldn't be shocked to see them try and start him a little bit out of the gate.
It could go for anything, and I wouldn't be shocked, and I wouldn't blame him. Right? Go for it. Who cares? And I mean, the biggest competition for McGarry is himself. 180 opponent batting average, 14% walk rate, right? 49 walks, 53 hits. He almost gave up more free passes than hits this past year. So you just hope. And guys, we talk about it here. Like some guys sometimes just start throwing strikes. It's the weirdest thing in the world. So you might as well go get the best stuff that you've got available here. And look, he's going to be less likely to stick than he is to stick. Just because of the command, but he also has, the highest upside of probably any guy that we're going to talk about here.
Yeah, 100%. The next guy up is our only position player that was taken in the Rule 5 draft, which is crazy because it is usually dominated by arms, but only one is kind of nuts to me. Daniel Susac, catcher from the Twins, took him from the A's, but then he was traded multiple times, goes to the Giants. And the Giants, he now becomes a decent prospect in the Giants system and someone who, as a catcher, could, I think logically will get a chance to be the backup to Patrick Bailey this season in San Francisco.
Seems like that was the focus, right? And it's funny, you have the reverse of what a lot of teams like to do with their catching tandem, which usually the backup is the defensive savant, right? Or at least a good defender. In this case, your primary catcher is the best defensive catcher in Major League Baseball, but you're not getting much offense from that position at all with Patrick Bailey. It's usually a 70 WRC plus, right? So might as well have your backup be a little bit more offensively driven. And that's what they did. Susac, the defense is probably about 45 grade. And that's part of what I think is a little bit limiting and why the A's didn't keep him on, put him on the 40-man roster. But I think for the fit, it's a little bit of the Blake Sable feel to it, right? Where more offensively driven, maybe they mix him in if they ever need at first base or whatever. I know Sable was more the outfield, but your backup is again a little bit more of an offensively driven piece. I don't know how it's going to play though. I'll be honest, because you take him from the PCL, where obviously you're going to have the ball fly a little bit more, and he put up fine numbers. It was an 840 OPS. I'm actually going to double check of what that converts into in terms of WRC plus.
Only 94.
Yeah, which
is crazy, but yeah.
So it's a 94 WRC plus and a 27% strikeout rate, and then you're going to drop him in one of the hardest ballparks to hit in. Look, if you have nothing to lose and maybe you see something here and you say, okay, we think we can get a little bit more out of him offensively. He has hit through most of his minor league career. He's been an above average bat. And even going back to when we did the athletic system going into the year, looked like a guy that was still top 15 type of prospect. Maybe he's someone that could just grab the short side of the platoon.
Yeah,
we'll see. But I think even just being able to say late in games, especially when Pat Bailey's really struggling from one side of the plate and he has to hit from that side of the plate, maybe that's where you can go pinch hit Susac and he's just a decent off the bench bat. But it's a 35% chase. I think that's going to affect him a little bit. The exit velocities are slightly above average. And I just feel like the margin for error is a little bit thin here. So he may stick if they just, because he's a backup catcher, that obviously helps his case. But if he's not hitting, it kind of defeats the purpose when you have a guy that your primary catcher doesn't hit and is an elite defender. Right. So that's where I'm a little bit less optimistic that Susac sticks.
Yeah. Where do you have the percentage at for a guy like that? Because I do think, again, role wise, right? Like it's more likely just because it is a backup catcher. They don't really have any like in-house options that look great, right? So like maybe you just let it ride with him for a year and you see what happens. But where would you be at with the stick percentage?
Yeah, I'm gonna go like for the entirety of the season. I'm gonna go like 40%, maybe 35%.
Yeah, little under average. That makes sense. The next guy up is a pitcher. Pirates take Carter Baumler and then trade him to the Rangers in that deal, but he comes from the Baltimore organization. Baumler looks pretty interesting by all indications. This is a guy who was a 5th round draft pick back at a high school, 23 years old now, going to be 24 come the season. Another guy with not a ton of experience. I mean, he spent the majority of the season in high A as a reliever and then finished the year in double A for a little bit. Seems to be a relief guy. Hasn't really started at all throughout his minor league career, but had a fairly good season. And, especially in double A was pretty strong this year with a 2.45, or in high A was strong and then got to double A and actually finished the year without giving up a run in double A.
Yeah, he looks interesting. And when I was doing the Rule 5 prep, like probably a guy overlooked a little bit too much because, a little bit on the younger side compared to some of the other upper level arms that you're going to see draft. I guess upper level is a little bit ambitious because he only made a handful of starts you mentioned in double A, but the way that appearances in double A, but the way that he finished the year was impressive. I mean, you look at the last 14 appearances for him. Baumler pitched to a 0.52 ERA between high A and double A. Struck out 38% of batters, walked 9.5. That's 17 1/3 innings of 1-run ball, 6 walks, 24 Ks. It's all about the fastball with him. Like that fastball at 95 miles per hour it really averaged 96 down the stretch of the season. Has great ride to it, good characteristics, explodes through the zone, and opponents at 140 against his fastball this past year. So like that's a plus heater. And then the curveball off of that is a good pitch. Like that was also playing results wise like a plus pitch. When I look at the shapes and everything, it looks more like an above average pitch. But you look at somebody like that who's getting more vert than his arm angle would probably suggest, and then also has some depth to that curveball. It's a really good tunnel that he can create. There's a ton of vertical separation, and I feel like Baumler at the very least is going to be a middle relief arm, but this looks like a guy that the stuff is good enough to potentially, pitch in the 7th inning or, maybe as he blossoms a little bit more, pitch a leverage.
Yeah, and he is another one of the names who had been floated a lot heading into the Rule 5. Like in addition to Pallette and one or two other guys we're going to mention later, like he was a common popular name going into this, and it seemed like a team would take a shot at him to be a reliever. Obviously, Baltimore's got a little bit more built up there, so they end up losing him in this. But I think that's actually one of the more lost guys that you're looking at. And you're like, dang, that guy actually could be a pretty strong reliever there. So an interesting get. And then I the Pirates, interesting that they took a pick and traded him. I think they had a 40-man crunch. I think it was more due to that than due to the fact that they didn't necessarily want to. I think they would have liked to add someone, and they were dealing with a roster crunch more.
Yeah, and swapped him for a lower level pitching prospect, and created a little bit of value there.
Yeah, 100%. 6th pick was Ryan Watson, coming from the Giants organization, drafted by the A's, traded to Boston. Watson, someone who we were just looking at a little before this, and the stuff is pretty interesting there. Another guy who seems like he'll be, has been a reliever for a number of years, spent the whole season in AAA this past year. In the PCL, results weren't amazing, but strikeout numbers were good, walk numbers were fairly low, and the stuff looks pretty strong.
The stuff is interesting because I don't think anything jumps off the page, but he's got, 4-seamer that averaged about 94, 95 miles per hour. The slider command is superb. And I think that's the part that really stands out to me. Nearly 70% strike rate. When you look at the location, I mean, the ability to go east-west and hit his spots and execute pretty darn consistently with that slider, I think elevates the floor. Watson doesn't have the stuff I think that a lot of these other guys have. But I think he has a pretty darn good chance of sticking just because I think he's going to be mostly used in middle relief. And you got a guy that's a fastball at 95 and it's a slider that in the mid 80s with good shape to it that he's going to spot really well. You combine those two and he's going to probably get by at a decent clip. He'll mix in a curveball, mix in a sinker. And I think that alone gives him enough and gets him enough going for him where he can maybe go multi-inning relief, kind of be this guy that can plug and play and be a bridge for you. And at 28 years old, not the sexiest stuff in the world, but in terms of just being one of those guys in the bottom of the bullpen. I think Watson could easily be that. And maybe the Red Sox, plug him into the pitch lab, can find a little bit more there and figure something out. But I feel like the floor is decently high with him. And I think that's why he's got, a 50% or better chance of sticking.
Yeah, I was going to say, where do you think you're at with that? Because I think Boston, it makes sense as a guy that the Red Sox would target, given what we've seen from him the past few years. He does seem like a guy that can go to Boston and eat some innings and and less leverage, and like maybe he works his way up to more prominent spots. But like for a team like the Red Sox, I think they will enjoy tinkering with him, seeing what they can do with him, and given he's a little older, he's got more experience, right? I think they'll feel comfortable keeping him. For me, he's probably one of the 4 to 5 most likely to stick guys, I would say, just because I think at Boston, though, they are obviously a better team. So that makes it harder for Rule 5 guys to stick on higher quality teams. In terms of purely the player, I think he'd be one of the more likely guys to stick of anybody on this list.
It's a really safe template to start with and build from. And I think that helps a lot. But the only difficulty is that the Red Sox have some urgency. So, if he's and they have other guys too in the system that could come up and kind of push him out. So that could present a little bit of a challenge, but I think Watson has a good chance to hold his own.
Yeah. The 7th pick was the Cardinals, who took right-handed pitcher Matt Pushard from the Marlins organization. One of 2 Marlins pitchers actually selected in this draft, testament to the Marlins pitching development. But Pushard's a guy that spent the last 3 years in the Marlins system, had thrown at least 50 innings for 3 years straight out of the bullpen. So reliable guy, has thrown a lot of innings. This past season spent the entire year in AAA, finishing the year with a 3.6 ERA across 62 innings out of the bullpen. Across the board, pretty strong numbers, though, and looks to be someone who, another 28-year-old, right? So definitely is ready for the big leagues. It's just a matter of if his stuff will be good enough to stick.
Yeah, and I don't totally know. I think it's interesting because he was just very effective overall, like you said, and just got the job done. And there's nothing to really poke a major hole in. It's just the fastball led the way for him big time. And both from a performance and like swing and miss perspective, and then also from a strike perspective, it was a 74% strike rate on the fastball, and then the slider, the cutter, and then the occasional changeup that he mixed in, it was a 58% strike rate. So that's gonna have to improve a little bit. But the good news is, for whatever reason, no one can hit his fastball. I think it's a flat approach angle, and that really helps. Or it seems to be deceptive for hitters. And Pushard, opponents at 162 against this fastball. 30% in zone whiff is ridiculously good. Like average, I think, for a 4-seam fastball in AAA was probably around 16%, 17%. So he's nearly doubling that up. Chase rate of about 36% is fantastic. It's probably 10% better, than most others are going to be there. So clearly that fastball is dominant within the zone, and opponents only had a 452 OPS against that. Limited damage, only give up 3 homers and 50 appearances this past year. There's a lot to like there in terms of the results, and clearly that fastball is a problem for hitters and at the AAA level. I'm interested to see if it'll be at the big league level, because if that fastball does get hit a little bit better, or at least just doesn't dominate quite to the same clip, there's more pressure on those secondaries to perform. And I don't have as much confidence in the secondaries translating as well at the big league level as that clearly plus fastball I did in AAA.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think it'll be interesting to see on a team like particularly for the Cardinals. I'm curious kind of where he'll slot in innings wise for them, but they have definitely some openings. Where are you at in terms of chances to stick for that team?
I'll probably go coin flip, status quo for him. Because if the fastball's playing, the fastball's playing, and he'll be fine. He's capable of going in multi-inning relief. We saw him go as long as 3 innings in one outing. We saw him go cut 2 innings or so on several others. But I don't know. I just have a little bit of concern that there's not enough there with the secondaries, and that might limit him. But the fastball, if it's anywhere near those results, he's going to stick.
Yeah, for sure. The next pickup in the Rule 5 was Roddery Muñoz. Goes to the Astros with this pick, coming from the Reds. I don't remember ever seeing a Rule 5 pick with 100 innings of big league experience. Maybe there's been a couple, but I don't think there's been many. This is an interesting one where he signs a minor league deal with the Reds after pitching, with them with St. Louis in this past year. then even if you're just signing a minor league deal a month ago, goes in the Rule 5. The Astros kind of ID'd him as someone who they think turned a little bit of a corner this year, being in more of a relief role. They really like the breaking stuff. They were on record saying that the breaking stuff is particularly what stood out to them in terms of a high leverage reliever for Muñoz. So interesting because he threw 11 innings this year in the big leagues for the Cardinals, but then also threw 57 and 2/3 for them in the minors. All of those as a reliever, and he had a really successful time in AAA compared to his major league experience to this point.
Yeah, the move to the bullpen was huge. When he was a starter, I mean, just it was a home run city. I mean, there was a major long ball issue because the fastball just isn't good. No, it's just that simple. So how can you work around that? Well, in single inning relief or 2 inning relief, go spam the curveball, which is disgusting, and then he's got a 92-mile-per-hour cutter. That's a good pitch. Just I think because he kind of cuts everything. It made the four-seamer really bad, and it made the sinker not very good either. And those two pitches combined for a 989 OPS this past season. That's not going to be great for you, right? Or at least over 900, if I'm not mistaken. But the cutter and the curveball are really good. And the curveball in particular is great for him. Lands it for a strike about 67% of the time, 45% chase rate for Muñoz there. And I think the Astros do well with those types of guys that just cut the baseball and can really spin it. And I think this is going to be, another interesting fit for them because he's totally different than he was as a starter because he can really mask that fastball. 62% of the pitches that he threw were cutter curveball. So, as long as you can keep that fastball, like the four-seamer and sinker usage down, below a combined 40%, I think he's got a good chance to be successful. And looks like he could be a good relief arm for him. I mean, he's still just 25 years old. So I think between his track record of just having pitched in the major leagues and having the innings that he has, and then the ability to throw strikes with the cutter and the curveball. Yes, the walk rate was still a little high, but you look at those two pitches and say, he at least fills up the zone at a decent clip with those two. I think he's got a decent chance to stick for them. So I'll go 60% on Muñoz.
Yeah.
I just because you can at the very least, if he's not missing bats at leverage like you want, you can throw him into just kind of mop up middle relief. And I just think at 25 years old, with the ability to stretch back out if you ever wanted to, the ability to go multi innings, like he got up to the big leagues even a little bit last year as well. I think that's a guy that you can stash, and even if he's disappointing you, is still worth keeping on the roster as a mop-up guy.
Yeah, and it seems kind of clear that the Astros view him as a guy who's secondaries first almost, and that they can hide the fastball even more in that role, right? You can have him be a 1-2 inning mop-up guy, and he can just throw a ton of that cutter and curveball combination. So that gives you a better chance to stick. If you're going to be a reliever, you have secondaries that you can that can be reliable pitches, right? So that's where I see him making sense. So I see that 60%. That makes a lot of sense. Anything else on him? I was going to say.
I was trying to think about anything like righties, and I think it's the thing. Yeah. You just really put him out there more against righties because of the spin. 620 OPS allowed against righties, 780 OPS allowed against lefties. So it's another thing where you can just be a little bit more particular with what situations you're putting them in. Yeah.
A little bit of a rant off the top here on the next guy from me, and then I'm going to let you get into it because I know he was one of the guys you were penciling from when we were going into the Rule 5. You were like, he's getting taken, and I thought the same thing. Peyton Pallette goes to the Guardians organization from the White Sox, interdivision snipe there. Pallette's a guy that I followed carefully for years, and he was a second-round pick who struggled a lot as a starter. He never could find the command even a little bit as a starting pitcher when he was coming up to the minor leagues. Transitions in 2024, kind of after a rough start as a starter, transitions into relieving, has a dominant second half of the year. He had a stretch in 2024 where he went like a month giving up like one run and was striking out everybody. You go into 2025, he's in big league camp. He was solid in big league camp. He comes into the year like this is one of the better relief pitching prospects in the system. Spends the second half of this past season, the entire second half, even more than second half actually, in AAA. And numbers weren't amazing by any means in AAA. But Pallette was a second round pedigree guy who transitioned to a bullpen role and has been generally very effective for a year and a half in a bullpen role, gotten up to AAA. Come September, I was expecting him to get added to the 40-man for the White Sox. Doesn't get added to the 40-man down the stretch, even though you knew he was going to be Rule 5 eligible. In my mind, that was like, okay, why is he not up in September? Because this is the guy who you're going to have to add to the roster. If he's not up in September, that already confuses me a little and means something. Come the deadline to add guys to the 40-man, he was the other name alongside Tanner McDougal, who was the obvious add, where I was like, You got roster spots. This is a guy who can be in your bullpen immediately to start the season pretty much. Doesn't get added to the 40-man. The second that happened, I knew he was out the door. So sorry, I apologize for the little bit of the rant there, but like, I just don't get it. I really don't get it. The White Sox had 5 spots on the 40-man, and they still took 2 guys in the Rule 5 draft, and they still have 3 spots open. This is, in my opinion, probably the most confusing unprotection to me, and honestly, in this draft.
Yeah, I'm with you. Like that was where, if you read the Rule 5 preview, like I think I said in the opening sentence was that I'm wondering what I'm missing here. And when the Guardians took him, it was like, all right, maybe I'm not missing anything. I think there's probably still some questions with the White Sox had about command, because even though he had cut the walk rate down, there was kind of this spraying aspect to it. It wasn't like he was drilling his spots. When he would miss, it would be somewhat bad misses. But the way he finished the year would have been more than enough for me to say, okay, like this guy's clearly putting it together here. And the final 30 appearances for Pallette, like at the AAA level, he pitched to a 2.78 ERA, and he had a 23.2% K minus BB rate. Like that's fantastic. The fastball really started to perform well. Like sitting 95 miles per hour. Historically, it would get hit a little bit, and the shape wasn't great. But this arm angle, where I think now that he's throwing a little bit harder, he's creating a little bit more ride from that 30-degree arm angle, and it's just a loose, whippy arm action. I think it just allows the fastball to play up a little bit more than maybe the pitch data would suggest, or what the Stuff Plus model may suggest. And it is just this loose whippiness that I think does create a bit of deception to the hitter. And I think that's evidenced by the sub 200 batting average against his fastball, a chase rate of nearly 30%, and good in zone whiff numbers at the upper levels. He's always been able to spin the baseball a little bit. And, I think he's gotten even better with that. And it's funny, like the changeup was not really the bread and butter in the past. The curveball was, and it seems like the changeup is actually a pitch that could be a good one for him as he started to find more confidence with it. And then Pallette also had a slider that looked like it was solid for him, and he still mixes in that curveball. The secondary command needs to get a little bit better, and command could be still a limiting factor for him ultimately. But with the 40-man roster spots that the White Sox had open, was a little bit of a surprise. We talked about that. And I think the Guardians are excited to add a guy in Pallette that also is capable of going multi-inning. Like we saw him on several different occasions. Like I think a lot of his appearances this year were 2-inning spurts. So even though they moved him into a bullpen role, like it wasn't always just like one and dive back out. Like he still has the ability to be stretched out to 30, maybe 40 pitches if you want to. And, maybe the Guardians see too, because of the unique pitch mix here, like down the line, it could be a guy that they try to stretch back out again, but at least in the short term, you have somebody that can, come out of the bullpen in relief here and has a good fastball, and then has a trio of decent secondaries.
Yeah, it just hurts that much more that it's in division and it's the Guardians. For me, as a guy who's following the White Sox, like you just look at it and you're like, yeah, maybe he's not going to pan out, but at the same time, you had spots open. You don't have more than 3 or 4 relievers on this roster who you actually feel comfortable with going into the major league roster. And it's now a division rival who you could see Pallette absolutely bite you in the bullet in the back for next 5 to 7 years, right? Like that stinks. That if he gets to the Guardians and they make a couple adjustments, maybe they can tick up the command a little bit, and he ends up being a stud reliever for the Guardians, you're having to face him for 6 years for a guy who you paid second round money. They paid over $2 million to sign Peyton Pallette coming out of college. And yeah, maybe it didn't work as a starter, but like that's a lot of money and time to invest in someone and then have in big league training and still have pretty good numbers. The White Sox are tending to move in the direction of multi-fastball guys. They're very heavy right now on the guys, the cutter, the sinker, and that isn't Pallette. So I think that could be part of it maybe. At the same time, like it just, this one confused me, honestly. And I do think I'd give him a 60 to 70% chance to stick with the Guardians, because I think they're going to use him cautiously, but also just continue to develop what he can be.
Yeah, I think he's slightly north of the status quo for me as well. And I think also because of the organization that he's in, where I think that they can, maximize the unique template that he provides. And another guy that you can unleash in positions for success, righties, 558 OPS, they hit 171 against him this past season. And so if you want to keep him away from lefties a little bit, that helps. Fly ball guy. So yeah, I think that was probably the biggest issue, is he doesn't follow the philosophy, to your point, of what the White Sox like to pursue. But sometimes there's exceptions to the rule, and I think he should have been one. Guardians fans, I think, should be excited to add another arm to the bullpen there that could be helpful for them. We're going to talk about one of the more surprising selections just because of where he has pitched or not pitched levels wise in a moment. That's Spencer Miles. But before that, quick break. Before we jump in, I want to tell you a little bit about something fun we've got going on Friday, December 12th. Topps Chrome update just came out, and it is one of the more fun products that you got in the hobby. And you got a bunch of debut patches out there, including Griffin Conine's got pulled, so I'm a little bit bummed about that. But we're still going to be chasing his rookie cards and hanging out with his dad, Jeff Conine, and Griff at the Dolphin Mall in Miami on December 12th, 2 o'clock. We're going to be ripping cards, hanging out. They're going to be signing things, taking pictures with you if you want. And we're going to be chasing those cards. We're going to do pack wars. Whoever pulls the lowest numbered Griffin rookie card could win a signed jersey there. We're going to be doing various other giveaways as well. And we'll all be there. It's going to be a lot of fun. So come visit the lids at the Dolphin Mall in Miami on Friday, December 12th, 2 o'clock. And we're going to have a good time. And you could potentially win or pull some really cool stuff. So we would love to see you there. Back into these last 4 guys that were taken in Rule 5. Spencer Miles. That was a surprising pick because, well, the guy hasn't really pitched above A-ball. And the last time he even pitched at A-ball in the Giants system was in 2022.
He hasn't pitched at all. That's the crazy thing. He's not even just like hasn't pitched above A-ball. He hasn't pitched, dude. The guy's thrown 21 professional innings total. 21 professional innings. And that's between the complex, not even actually. That's less than that. I think I was off on that. It's less than 20 professional innings. So where are you getting? I mean, like, this is so interesting to me. And I want you to break down kind of what you see of him as a pitcher. Because, like, the Jays must see something here. You look at a guy like this. If you're going to take a guy who's thrown this few innings and never thrown more than 10 innings above A-ball, you really must see something with the stuff for a 25-year-old guy who's had TJ and back surgery.
Yeah.
There's got to be something here with the stuff that they look at and they say, we just want to take an absolute swing for the fences with this guy because he hasn't thrown at all.
Well, and the funniest part, too, is he already was kind of a guy that you weren't really basing the results on when he was drafted in the 4th round in 2022, because his draft year at Missouri, Miles had a 6.2 ERA in 69 and 2/3 innings. So this is a guy that, hasn't really, didn't really perform very well at Missouri. In college, he had in his career, a 6.27 ERA, and then barely threw professionally. And not only are you going to bring him up from, like, the last time we saw him throw was, of course, just recently the Arizona Fall League, but in terms of regular season, was at the complex. Like, in 2024, he only threw at the complex. So, yeah, this is clearly something that the Blue Jays see here, and they say, okay, we see a talented arm that we're excited to unlock. They must have liked what they saw in the AFL in a limited sample. What's interesting is you got a fastball that averaged 95 this past year. Again, very small sample here. We got 46 plate appearances to work with. I got 177 pitch sample. But he landed the heck out of his slider for a strike, and that slider is like 91 miles per hour. He's got a bigger curveball at 80 miles per hour. And then he's got this sinker that he can run in on the hands of righty. So it is this 4-pitch mix, and I guess 5 if you count a couple of changeups that he mixed in there, that you're working with and building off of. But yeah, I don't know. I found myself very fascinated by all of this. Like, nothing jumps off the page stuff-wise unless I'm missing something either. So I don't know. I still find myself trying to figure it all out, but it's fun, and this is why I love the Rule 5. Like, clearly there is something that the Jays see here, and they're excited to work with it and see what they can unlock from Spencer Miles, who, for his sake, I'm also just hoping he can stay healthy after just what's probably been such a turbulent ride for him. But even just looking through some of the hitter reactions, he clearly has like a very flat approach angle, and they don't pick the ball up very well. And there's a lot of late swings, and maybe there's something beyond what we can see and there has to be, that the Jays are excited to experiment with.
Yeah, this one's so fascinating. And this is one of those where it's just like, all right, let's see what the Jays do. And this, like, the Jays have proven to us now, and we've talked about this many times on the show, they've proven their ability to develop pitchers the past year or two, particularly, has really gotten much better. You see that with a guy like Dylan Cease, right? They're willing to give money to Dylan Cease because they think they're going to just get him back to his peak level. They've done this with many prospects. They've been able to turn prospects into trade capital at the deadline, right? You saw guys like Kyle Steven become a legit trade piece from them, from what they had developed him into. I mean, this is one of those guys where it's just like you tip your cap to the Jays and you say, hey, let's see what you're going to do here, because it's so hard to like understand on paper why they would have a guy with 15 professional innings and none above A ball be their Rule 5 pick.
Yeah, and I'm looking like from behind home plate, looking at some video now. There's definitely just some late bite and unique action to it, and I think that's something that they're excited to build off of. But yeah, I mean, it has been a pitching renaissance in the Blue Jays system, and they're really betting on it now. So this is the guy I'm the most excited to see, just because it's such a fascinating wrinkle, and probably just because of. I'm looking at the video right now. These swings are really tardy. So hitters just must struggle to pick it up. They must have got some really encouraging reports out of the AFL, and yeah, I just can't wait here. So
Yeah,
I'm rooting for him, given everything that he's had to overcome. And yeah, that cutter-ish slider, it's really more of a cutter. Out of the same slot, really hard to pick up out of the hand. Is getting a lot of like wand type of swings from him. There might just be something there. So Spencer Miles, cool story, back surgery. Like, I'm definitely rooting for him. And I think this would be one of the most impressive leaps in Rule 5 history, given that he not only is last pitched in the last several years at the complex, but he has barely pitched, period, as you mentioned. And then even going back to college, wasn't even very good there. So he might have his first like sustained success at the major league level, which is, I feel like, something that can only happen in baseball.
Yeah, pretty crazy. Definitely a guy you're rooting for. Looking at it from the likeliness angle, would you say it's a tick below 50? It's got to be below 50, well below 50 because of this situation. Probably 30.
Yeah,
25,
I'm
30
gonna
maybe.
I'm gonna throw a 20% on him. Look, call me a
If it does,
skeptic.
be
I'm rooting
amazing.
for him. I hope I'm wrong. How could I do anything other than throw a 20% probability on
Yeah.
somebody with the situation that he has had?
Yeah. Makes sense. The 11th pick in the Rule 5 draft was Cade Winquest by the Yankees. Comes over from the Cardinals organization, a 25-year-old right-hander who was an 8th-round pick a handful of years ago. Spent this season split between high A and double A. As a starter this season, threw 106 innings in his his third professional season here. Was hurt in 2024, but a pretty full workload this season of ERA tick below 4. What do you got on Winquest going to the Yankees here?
Yeah, it's just a well-rounded arsenal. I think it's a good plot too. You look at the scatter plot, like it's really like, I think, spread out really nicely. So you've got different pitch shapes. I know the Yankees too, like they like to get their hands on guys and start tweaking with things as well. But he's got that bridge cutter that they love. That's just kind of close to that gyro shape there. But then the slider is kind of a swervy shape. You have this bigger curveball as well that is clearly different enough in shape as well, like more than enough vertical separation there. Then he's got the four seamer, and he'll sprinkle in a changeup. So you just have the definitive, 4 different pitch shapes. I think is really cool, and something that I know that the Yankees were probably excited about. And then you have the definitive different velocity like barriers too, where fastball average 95.5, the curveball average 70, 78, the cutter average 90, and the slider average 83. So you have all of these different thresholds there and markers of velocity that I think create a pretty wide range of what hitters have to prepare for, right? You've got different velocity bands and good shape, just separation. And I think that's going to help him, be effective. Obviously, the Yankees are going to shoot higher in terms of like starting pitching, but this is somebody that clearly is capable of mixing his offerings enough to be a decent starter. But I wonder, in looking at what he has arsenal wise, the Yankees feel like, well, in shorter spurts, that fastball could tick up to 97. And if it's sitting 97, we really like it, because now that cutter might be 91, 92, and that curveball could be closer to 80. Now it's a power arsenal that could be really effective in multi-inning reliefs with a guy that's already stretched out through 106 innings this past year. So yeah, I think that's the fascinating part. Missed a lot of time with injury in 2024, and so I think that's why he only finished the year in Double-A. But I think this is somebody who could be a sneaky arm that the stuff really ticks up in shorter spurts.
Yeah, that's why I was going to ask you about role off the bat, because there's no chance the Yankees are putting a Rule 5 pick in their rotation. I
No,
don't see that happening. So then it's like, how do you kind of, is it just a guy who can be that long reliever? He can do some mop-up work, but he can also kind of be able to give you a little bit more, like you said, a little ticked up stuff. So I think that makes the most sense, right? A guy that can tick up a little out of the bullpen, but can still be a, your starter had a really rough day. This guy can give you 4 innings of solid work potentially, instead of being a full starter.
I think they're excited to work with this template here because,
Yeah.
I mean, that fastball in 1 to 2 inning spurts could tick up to the upper 90s, and then that cutter at 92, like that's going to be a really effective, I think headlining mix. And then again, I think that curveball could be gross too. So I feel like it's going to be more of that multi-inning relief. But if he blossoms the way that they are probably hoping, maybe that's a guy that could start to ease his way into leverage. 25 years old, the command's decent, only walked 8.5% of batters. And I think he's a sneaky arm of this group. And that's why Yankees, it's really hard to stick, but I'd put him at like 55%. I'll put him 55 to 60%.
Yeah, decently high. The next guy, second to last guy up here, the second guy taken from the Marlins. The Phillies take Zach McCambley, right-handed pitcher from the Marlins organization, a former third-round pick with some good pedigree out of Coastal Carolina, 26-year-old righty who spent the season split between double and triple, primarily all completely out of the bullpen, 62 innings of work at a 2.9 ERA, strikeout rate above 30%, walk rate around 8.5%. Really strong season for McCambley out of the bullpen in the minors for the Marlins. And even the Phillies, right, being one of the better teams in the league, like seems like a guy who could find a role in that bullpen.
Yeah, I love Zach, man. I'm so happy for him, and he's a guy that I've got to watch his progression dating all the way back to the Cape Cod League in 2019, and he was fantastic out there. And even dating back to 2019, there was one thing that always stood out with Zach McCambley, and it's his ability to spin the baseball. And I mean, his slider is just disgusting, and it always has been, and I think it always will be. The question had just always been, how can he supplement that, right? The fastball had always been hit pretty hard, and that was a challenge for him. And so the Marlins focus on that, and I think the previous regime wasn't very good at being able to maximize a guy like that, even though they did have some success in the pitching development world. This new regime, I think, really helped him in terms of kind of finding that bridge cutter at about like 89 miles per hour to 90 so that he could cut the fastball usage down more. And then in doing so, cutting down that fastball usage, I think actually made it more effective because you get lulled into this cadence of everything working horizontally. And even though this 4-seam fastball doesn't have great shape, it almost catches you off guard. And all of a sudden the 4-seamer played a lot better and it was effective. He only threw it about 23% of the time, but opponents only hit 180 against McCambley's 4-seamer this past year. So that's pretty insane considering how it had, not really performed well in the past. He also dealt with like a really fluky, weird injury in 2024, I think with his adductor. And so just working back from that, I was just so happy to see him, healthy and back from that. But the breaking ball is outrageous. Like that sweeper, opponents hit 120 against it last year. 120. And it's an 85 mile per hour pitch that just Phillies fans will see it and they're gonna be like, holy crap, this thing is disgusting. It's a late bite. Hitters just don't seem to pick it up very well. And in his entire professional career, he has been able to get a ton of whiffs on that. But the difference had always been it was that and then the fastball, and he just didn't really have much else. He tried to throw a changeup. That wasn't really there. He tried to, figure out what else he could go with, and it just never was really there. No. Now you have that cutter as the bridge, and the 4-seamer now can still be good enough at 94 miles per hour where you're changing eye levels. He's probably someone you want to keep away from lefties, like lefties, because you think about just more of that sweepy slider and a cutter. It's not going to play as well, but the cutter did become a little bit more of an equalizer to lefties. Righties had a 486 OPS against McCambley this past year, and they had 5 extra base hits. So you put him in situations to go get righties, and he's going to do a good job. And again, can speak to the person, salt of the earth, easy guy to root for, and I think Phillies fans will really like him. Final 30 appearances of the season, 34 and 2/3 innings, a 2.6 ERA at the AAA level. Everything you wanted to see. 31% strikeout rate, 6% walk rate. He was great in spring training last year. I think he's going to be good in spring training this year. I'm going to give you a biased percentage, so I almost should abstain. But, I think if I try to remove it, I think he's got a 60% chance to stick. And my only concern is if that fastball and cutter get hit a little bit harder. But he seemed to have figured that out to a degree this past year just by being able to locate those two pitches the way that he did. 70% strike rate between those two.
Yeah. I was going to say, taking your bias out of it, I would have gone over 50 anyways. So definitely over 50 in my eyes. I mean, when you got a pitch that grades out like that, I think you can protect him a little too. Like you said, you can go low to medium leverage against righties, particularly let him throw the heck out of that breaking ball. And then you see from there. For a team like the Phillies, like they have a fairly deep bullpen. Obviously, you've got one of the best closers in baseball too. Like you can be somewhat sheltered with a guy like that and hope that by the later part of the season, when you're competing for the playoffs in the World Series, he starts to build up that confidence, and then you can start to deploy him in some more higher leverage situations.
100%. When the last thing I'll mention with him is like, he only allowed 3 home runs total this year. So he's really limited the long ball. And I think that's really important, and doesn't walk guys. So he's never going to just fully beat himself. And what I really like about, I think the fit is you're going to have higher leverage arms, no doubt. But there's a lot of times where you use your higher leverage arms earlier, and then you got to go get a righty, and it's a really good righty. And you're like, oh shit. Well, McCambley can locate 3 really good sliders and get some of the best righties in Major League Baseball out. So I think just being able to have that in your back pocket for matchup dependent stuff is great as well. And I mean, he was probably one of the first guests we ever had on like Locked On MLB Prospects and Locked On Marlins early in my podcasting days, and always been a friend. So so excited for McCambley, and I really am rooting for him to stick in Philly.
Great guys to root for sure. The final pick of the Rule 5 drafts was the only team to take 2 players, and that was my Chicago White Sox. Alexander Alberto, coming from the Tampa Bay Rays organization, is a 6'8", 24-year-old right-handed reliever. Definitely a relief arm. The White Sox go with 2 guys that neither had pitched at the higher levels at all, had never pitched above high A, spent most of the year in high A this past season. Unlike Paez, who they view as a potential starter, Alexander Alberto is very much not that. He is going to be a reliever, strictly a singular spurt reliever. The White Sox see him. He has a cutter. It's a fastball, but it's cuttery that ticks up to 100 miles an hour. That is the bread and butter for him. He throws it over 70% of the time. The White Sox immediately, Chris Getz, his first thing he said was that cutter is really unique, and we think it can be really special. They pointed out that is the pitch that this guy is going to live and die by. Yeah. That pitch really plays at the big league level, he can carve out a role as a legitimate reliever. And if it doesn't, probably goes back to Tampa. But an interesting one because he's 24, so he's a little bit older, but still has never thrown above high A. This season, the strikeout numbers are really good. Command was decent, not great. But it really comes down to that one pitch and then maybe expanding the arsenal depending on how they kind of work with him.
Yeah, I think that pitch, averaging 98 miles an hour. It's just ripping cutters like that. It's really hard to figure out sometimes because sometimes those pitches get crushed and then sometimes they're extremely effective. And I think usually a good tell, of course, is always going to be the in zone whiff, which was above average, but then also it's the ground ball rate because that tells you like hitters think they're getting the barrel to it, and then it just cuts a little bit more than they think, a little really late. And a 58% ground ball rate, that's going to play, right? The fact that he allowed only 1 homer on the whole season, the thing that makes a guy like this hard for me to figure out is, but of course, still worth the gamble is, okay, it played well at high A. Yeah. Sometimes just sheer velocity plays well at high A. But if that shape doesn't play as well at double A, triple A, and now we're just going to go straight to the big leagues, then he doesn't really have a plan B. like we talked about. It's live or die by that. But I think for the White Sox, I'm sure they modeled that out. I'm sure they looked at it and said, we think this has a good chance to work at the big league level. And if it does, he's in a good spot. So I think you still need to cut down on 78% usage there, almost 80% usage there. But he can, right? He mixed in some other offerings that looked like they could be all right. And I think, that slurvy curveball slider, it's more of a slider. Looks like it could be a fine, complimentary pitch, above average, potentially complimentary pitch as well. But I mean, yeah, you're looking at a 6'8" righty who sits 98 and gets up to triple digits. That's going to be fun. And I mean, I think he touched 101 with that cutter. Like,
Yeah,
we've seen guys succeed with that. I think there's pressure on the command. I think like part of what made Class A so good was that he could spot it. But the walk rate a little bit high because I think he was trying to throw those secondaries. 65% strike rate on that cutter. So if he can keep building on that, I think Alberto could absolutely be a guy that pitches at leverage. But I also think there's a huge risk that it just doesn't work. And then you'll find out quickly is the good. It's like it'll be pretty evident pretty quickly with Alberto of whether he's going to stick or not.
Yeah, and I think the White Sox like knew that, and again they leaned into the upside. They had 2 picks. They wanted to get guys that could be really good, and yeah, they might both go back. That's very possible. But with Alberto, I think they see it as like there's a unique, excellent pitch, and if it plays up at the big league level in a singular inning spurt, you let that fly. If it ends up getting towards 99, 100 consistently, and it maintains that shape and those whiff numbers, right? Like you've got a great pitch. So this is a guy who, we'll see. I'd probably put it at like 45% just because if that pitch doesn't play, it doesn't play. If that pitch plays, he could be a 7th, 8th inning guy for the White Sox as soon as this year. And like, that is possible. I think Getz said like the goal is a high leverage reliever with Alberto.
That's exactly where I was going to go is 45%. But it's like the McGarry conversation where I'd rather have a lower chance of sticking, especially if I'm a rebuilding team.
Yeah.
Lower chance of sticking, higher ceiling than higher chance of sticking, lower ceiling. Right. Like, what does that do for you as a rebuilding team? Who cares?
Right.
You'll go find guys like that all the time.
To some degree, that might be part of the thing with Pallette. I don't necessarily agree with it, but I think that could be some of the logic with replacing a Pallette with a Paez and an Alberto in this draft is the fact that there is something to chase here a little bit. Not saying that's exactly how I would view it because I would like all 3 of them personally still on the roster.
Why not both?
Yeah, why not both? But with that said, I do think Alberto has a chance to be a really cool, fun back end of the bullpen guy if that pitch clicks and if he kind of takes another step with the command. So
and who knows what they can unlock from a 6'8", slender man kind of
huge, funky, for sure. So it was a fun Rule 5 draft, man. That was a good time. I enjoyed being here for it. It was a cool experience for sure.
My only complaint is I would have liked another bat or 2. I always like a Rule 5 bat. Cameron Cawley, someone's going to regret not taking that freakazoid athlete as well. But, I get it. I wouldn't really want to take a bat and have to stash him either. That'll do it for this episode. We are back on the regular schedule going into next week. We're going to hopefully have another team top prospect list. Phillies should be done next week as we finalize the rest of the NL East. And we're going to have some other fun episodes. We're getting into our bag on creative content. So I think you guys are going to like some of the stuff that we have. We'll have redrafts coming up. We'll have retrospectives of where maybe we got some old prospect lists wrong, why certain prospects didn't work out, all of this good stuff. So it's going to be a ton of fun, a lot of interesting stuff coming up. And then of course, continuing to hammer through these team top prospect lists. So as always, thank you for listening. Have a great weekend. And we look forward to talking prospects with you next week.